into number 10, we have Where is Cynthia? This is a very bizarre missing persons case that was also featured on US TV show Unsolved Mysteries. Cynthia Anderson was a legal secretary from Ohio in 1980. The 20-year-old loved crime and romance novels, but began having a reoccurring dream that an intruder entered her home. She told her mother about it, but she didn't think too much of it until she started receiving weird phone calls at work. Her employers even went as far as to have an emergency buzzer installed on her desk. On the morning of August 4th, 1981, she wasn't at work, but her car was in the car park. On her desk was a novel that she was reading, but the page was open on a passage that detailed an abduction. A month later, the local police started getting weird calls saying that Cynthia was being held in a basement, but wouldn't give any further detail. To this day, she's never been found, and that case is cold. Coming into number 9, we have Who Shot Tupac? But like, who? Tupac Shakur was one of the most famous rappers in the world when he was killed in Las Vegas in September 1996, nearly 23 years ago to the day. He was just 25 years old when he was gunned down in Vegas, having seen Mike Tyson and Frank Bruno fight, which must have been epic. As Tupac and his entourage stopped at a red light in the Flamenco Road and Koval Lane area, he was shot 4 times. He died 6 days later and was not in a state to identify his killer. Earlier that night, it was reported that the rapper had beef with the street gang the Crips. They could have had something to do with it, we'll just never know. A witness came forward, but then they were murdered in New Jersey, thousands of miles away, before they could even submit to further police questioning and identify a suspect. Of course, there are people out there that still believe Tupac is alive and living under a new identity. Perhaps we'll never know. Coming into number 8, we have The Children of Hamelin. So you guys may have heard of the Pied Piper, a little fairy tale with a pretty key moral at the end of it. Pay your bills, if not a bohemian musician will steal your kids. Right? Well, it turns out that there is more than just a lesson to this story. There is actually an 800-year-old unsolved mystery. You see, the Pied Piper of Hamelin was actually a real man, a piper dressed in exuberant clothing who turned up in Lower Saxony in the village of Saxon itself in 1284. According to church records, he did steal 130 children from the town who were never seen or heard from again. They were simply spirited away. But were they? We just don't know. Coming into number 7, we have Stonehenge. We're taking it back to my home country of England, but what is going on? What's going on with Stonehenge? I don't know. Stonehenge sits pretty in the Salisbury Plains in England and was laid out around 4,000 years ago at a time where transporting and lifting 50-ton sarsen sandstone and bluestone rocks was legitimately beyond human capability. Aside from the mystery of how it was built, we also don't know what it was used for. The main theory is that it was for some kind of religious worship, although there were far more cosmic suggestions. The structure is aligned with various celestial objects and has been the focus of pagan celebration, especially around the summer solstice. Archaeological digs have also suggested that a breed of giant cows were used either to assist in the construction or, we're just chilling there, present, mooing. Cows are just so great. Does anyone ever just stop and think about cows? I love cows, even ancient giant cows. Cows! Moo. Recently discovered underneath the stone structure were 17 further mysterious ancient monuments, which just adds more mystery to the pile of mystery. It's a mystery sundae with a side of mystery and a mystery cherry on top. Coming in at number 6, we have the Zodiac Killer. The Zodiac Killer is one of the most elusive serial killers in modern American history. The mystery male murdered at least 5 people, but claims to be behind the deaths of up to 37 people. Despite no arrests, the California Department of Justice has maintained an open case file on the Zodiac murders since 1969. The Zodiac Killer murdered 3 women and 1 man, with 2 other male victims surviving. The killer claimed to have killed many people in the infamous Ciphers, which was sent to the police. The Zodiac Killer was given their name as a result of the cryptograms sent to the police, which were a mystery unto themselves. One of those has definitely been solved, but the others not so much. The last known Zodiac murder was in the 1970s, so in theory the killer could be dead, or they could be living out their days among us, which is terrifying. So yeah, despite descriptions of the male killer at the time and many sketches of him, the case is unsolved and the murderer is, or was, at large. This is so mysterious. At number 5, we have the Texarkana Moonlight Murders. Who was the Phantom Slayer? Honestly, we don't know. The Texarkana Moonlight Murders were a series of very grisly killings that took place in Texas in the spring of 1946. attacks. 8 people were attacked over 10 weeks, with 5 of the victims succumbing to their injuries. A pair of survivors claimed that the killer was wearing a white pillowcase with eye holes cut out over his head. What a ghoul. All of the attacks happened to couples and took place on weekends. The murders sent the town of Texarkana into absolute panic, as I'm sure you can imagine. City inhabitants locked themselves indoors with guns, and it was kinda like scenes from The Purge out there. The Texas Rangers were even called in, and people started arming up and taking to the streets to try and catch the killer, but the assailant never struck again. At the time, the Texas Ranger captain saw that the criminal killer was, and I quote, a shrewd criminal who left no stone unturned to conceal his identity and activities. He was never caught. Coming into number 4, we have the dark deaths of Overton Bridge. I've never heard of a dog taking their own life until now, but it seems that there's a bridge in Dumbarton in beautiful Scotland which is A, haunted, and B, has claimed the lives of many dogs. This makes me feel really sad. It seems that since the 1960s, nearly 100 dogs have leapt to their death from the bridge, falling 50 feet into jagged rock below. Why the dogs have jumped? We just don't know. Reportedly, they freak out and they leap. The Scottish Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals has sent teams to investigate, but nobody has yet solved the mystery. While the dog deaths are the main issue, it seems that a man inexplicably threw his baby from the bridge in 1994. Now dogs are firmly required to be on leashes. Coming into number 3, we have the Phoenix Lights. What was going on in the skies of Arizona, Nevada, and Sonora? In 1997, thousands of people saw what they thought were UFOs in the sky between 7:30 and 10 p.m. at night. Thousands of people reported triangular formations of lights passing over the southern states and in North Mexico. A sizable number of people also reported actually seeing a UFO. One witness, who didn't want to be named, which I kind of understand, said, "It was totally silent. I've never seen anything close to the colors from the exhaust that propelled that thing. It was as big as downtown Prescott and completely blocked out the stars." Now, the shared phenomenon actually had a lot of credible witnesses, including the Arizona governor Fife Symington. While the original event happened 22 years ago, possible reoccurrences have happened in 2007 and 2008. Coming into number 2, we have the case of D.B. Cooper. On November the 24th, 1971, the eve of Thanksgiving, a man using the name Dan Cooper successfully hijacked a Boeing 727 plane in the airspace between Portland and Seattle. The man boarded the plane as a passenger and ordered a bourbon and soda. After takeoff, he handed a note to a flight attendant, but she didn't read it, assuming it was his phone number. Creepy. He then leant over to her and said, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." Not what you want to hear. Long story short, he demanded and successfully extorted $200,000 in ransom, over $1 million in today's currency. He then parachuted out of the plane, jettisoned, gone. Nobody knew whether he landed alive or where he was at all. There was an extensive manhunt from the FBI, but the man's real identity has never been solved. Numerous theories were circulated. The serial number on the cash he stole were also released and searched for, but again, no trace was found. As of 2016, the investigation has been suspended and remains one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries. Finally, coming into number 1, a mystery of our age, we have the disappearance of flight MH370. Malaysian Airlines 370 disappeared on March the 8th, 2014, flying from Kuala Lumpur Airport to Beijing in China. The aircraft last made contact with air traffic control when it was over the South China Sea, less than an hour after takeoff, before then completely disappearing from their radar. The last words from Captain Shah were, "Good night, Malaysian 370. The plane was still tracked on military radar, which suggested that actually it deviated to cross the Malay Peninsula, until finally disappearing from radar altogether over the Andaman Sea. Oddly, no phone calls of distress or signals were sent out or anything like that. No word. Silence. The black box could have shed light on what happened, but it was never found. Neither was the plane or its wreckage, despite millions of dollars being spent on finding it. So what happened? Alien abduction? ISIS abduction? It simply disappeared into a parallel universe? We just don't know. Do you guys have any answers to these mysteries? And again, don't forget to let me know what the weirdest thing that's ever happened to you is.
Coming in at number 10, we have what was before the Big Bang. The common consensus is that there was a massive event at the beginning of time that brought all of the universe into existence, and a bunch of stuff happened and then humans showed up. I hope you realize that I'm fast tracking this whole story a little bit. But some of the brightest minds on the planet have been able to use their collective intelligence to pull back the data to the point where the universe erupted from a condensed little sliver of explosion and fired out billions of galaxies across the ever-expanding universe. But everything that we understand about physics doesn't give us any information about what was before. Many scientists have uttered the words, "It doesn't make sense anymore." Man, that must be frustrating to just not be able to crack the code. My speculation is, and I come at this with zero knowledge of how the universe works, but that before the universe started, there was Samuel Jackson. Because that guy's everywhere. He's done like 200 movies. Coming in at number 9, we have dark matter. If you get into the world of science fiction, then you would have for sure heard of some character using dark matter for something, and it's usually very dangerous for whatever reason. And why is that? Well, here's the thing. Scientists still don't know what dark matter is. They have never been able to bottle the stuff and look at it closely, but the universe shows a lot of signs that it does exist. The speculation as to what dark matter is basically a web of particles so plentiful that it holds the universe together. To give you perspective, what we can see in the universe, the stars, the planets, the moons, all of that only takes up about 5% of the endless void. Now, dark matter is thought to take up 25% of the space. There's speculation that dark matter has a gravitational pull, and that's why people think it props up the universe. Other people think that dark matter is an undiscovered property of gravity. Really, we have no idea what's going on, so when you read a science fiction book and they talk about dark matter, remember that the writer has no idea either. At number 8, we have why do we sleep? Well, because Stone Cold said so. That's a super old reference that probably no one will know, but this has been a question that has baffled scientists for an extremely long time. We know the benefits of sleep. When you sleep, your body repairs itself. Sleep is good for your cognitive function. Sleep helps your brain get in information. I could go on for 20 videos about all the scientific evidence about how important sleep is for your health. In fact, getting better sleep is the easiest and cheapest way to get healthier, but the question still stands. Why? There are other organisms on the planet that never need to sleep, like bullfrogs, who won't fall asleep but they go into a rest state. There's a lot of speculation. Some people think that because our bodies are so much more complex, but they still come from the same genetic soup as a lot of the other things on this planet, our cells can't run something this powerful without taking a break. Other people think that this was some sort of defense mechanism created to wait out predators, but in the end, we still don't have the answers. Coming in at number 7, we have the multiverse theory. Now, I want to start off by saying that this theory is still very unproven. It is all speculation. There are some microwave signals that come from the universe, and some scientists think this is evidence of other universes, but it's not like gravity, where we know it's real, we just don't know why. The multiverse theory is that, very much like the infinite expanding universe, there's also an infinite number of other universes that have all different variations of reality, which is pretty much the backbone of the show Rick and Morty. This could mean that there is a universe where you are the hot chick, so feel good about yourself. Now, even if this theory was true, it wouldn't be easy to go visit these places. Beyond the fact that we would have to build something to open a gate to these worlds, the laws of physics that bind these other universes together could be so different from our own that going to them would literally tear your atoms apart. At number 6, we have why does time flow forward? Well, what is perceived as forward, you feel me? I mean, when I first was reading about this, I thought, well, because it does. It can only move one way. But why is the ultimate question. I think that's why I never became a scientist, because I never think to ask these questions. Newton wrote, all motion may be accelerated or slowed, but the flowing of absolute time is not liable to any change. And it's even in question, how could you measure the flow of time? I mean, time could stop moving right now and then start moving the very next second, and we would never be able to tell the difference because our lives continue no matter what. So maybe this is a question that doesn't need to be asked, but I'm glad that we're asking it, because one day I would like to go back in time so I can go to Woodstock. Coming in at number 5, we have how does gravity work? I mean, if you ask a flat earther, they'll tell you that gravity is fake and we're all held down by wind or some nonsense, but thankfully over here at Most Amazing Top 10, we don't use flat earth science. Now, we do know the effects of gravity. It basically pulls things in, and the more mass something has, the stronger its gravitational pull. Like the moon is smaller than the earth, so if you go up there and jump around, you will feel like you should be playing for the NBA. Gravity even has a massive effect on how the planet acts. The moon's gravitational pull will pull in and out the tides. But why? Why does this happen? Coming in at number 4, we have why do magnets exist? Now, we do know a lot about magnets. I mean, you can give them to a child and they can easily figure out how the opposite forces of a magnet will connect to one another and the same sides reject each other, like the majority of people I message on dating apps. We know that there are magnetic poles on each side of the planet, and we know that the electromagnetic force is one of the largest forces in the universe. But we are still left scratching our heads when it comes to the terms as to why they are here. Magnetism is one of the great underlying forces of the universe, and unlocking this one could answer a ton of questions about existence itself. Coming in at number 3, we have the placebo effect. The mind is a very powerful thing, and if you ever needed evidence, just look at the countless studies on the placebo effect. One of the craziest studies was one done on arthroscopic knee surgery. This is a common practice in older people with knee problems. A very simple surgery will be performed where 2 incisions are made on each side of the knee, and a doctor goes in and cleans out fluid and cleans up cartilage in the knee. Now, the purpose of this study was to find out what was more effective, the cleaning of the cartilage or the cleaning of the fluid. In order for the study to be successful, there was a control group that was given a mock surgery without their knowledge. Slits were made on the side of the knee, and even a fake surgery was shown on a screen for the patient to watch, but no actual surgery was performed. And the control group recovered just as well, and in some cases better, than the people who had the surgery. So in other words, the mind repaired the body somehow. Now, how this happens, we don't know, but it goes to show how much your thoughts can have influence over your body. Coming in at number 2, we have dark energy. Now, it sounds like we're going to go into a Marvel movie or something. What on earth is dark energy? Well, have you been paying attention to the list so far? We don't know what it is. And when I say we, I mean people much smarter than me. But we speculate that dark energy is what makes up the other 70% of the universe. Now, since the universe is constantly expanding like my gut after I refuse to listen to my own body's signals to stop eating, there needs to be some explanation as to why this is happening. The speculation is that dark energy is the cause of this never-ending growth spurt. Dark energy could be created by quantum particles smashing into each other all over the known universe. This is happening so many times that it would take a good portion of this video just to count all the zeros. But these collisions create energy, which in turn is pushing the universe apart. The question is, how far can the known universe get pushed? Could it get pushed to the point where reality is ripped apart? I don't know, I'm not smart enough to answer this. And coming in for the number 1 spot is quantum entanglement. Now, it sounds like I'm just making this stuff up, but I promise you I am not. This is very real. Quantum entanglement is when 2 particles that are nowhere near each other will start to mirror each other. Now, why is this strange? Well, because it was long thought that only something within a particle's environment could affect it. On top of this, the only way that particles could be doing this is if they were communicating in some way to one another, like they were hooked up on WhatsApp or something. But here's the thing, these particles are so far apart and moving together so perfectly that the speed in which they would have to be sending information breaks the laws of physics. The information would have to move faster than the speed of light, which was thought to be impossible. Now, how is this happening? Once again, we have no idea, but it begs the question, will we one day be able to move faster than the speed of light? I hope so, because that would be cool.
Starting off this countdown, we have the USS Cyclops. On February 16th, 1918, the US Cyclops set out to Baltimore, Maryland from Rio. It was estimated to arrive on March 13th, but it never made it there. The ship and all the 306 members on board disappeared without a trace. The ship was never found, nor were any of the bodies. Now, there's a lot of things here that don't make sense. For example, how could the biggest ship in the US Navy disappear without a trace? Number 2, if they were in trouble, why didn't they send an SOS signal? And why were there no pieces of wreckage found? As described by the Santa Fe magazine, they said, and I quote, "Usually a wooden bucket or a cork life preserver identified as belonging to a lost ship is picked up after a wreck, but not so with the Cyclops. There was just nothing left behind." It was a very weird and eerie case. Moving on at number 9, we have the Flannan Isle Lighthouse Keepers. On December 7th, 1900, 3 lighthouse keepers took their spot in Flannan Isle to do a 2-week shift. However, when the boat returned to collect them after their shift, they were nowhere to be found. They disappeared under very weird circumstances. For example, When they got to the lighthouse, it was locked. Inside, the clock had randomly stopped working. All their gear was left inside, and there was a meal on the table ready to be eaten. However, their bodies were never found. One other eerie thing would be the lighthouse keeper's journal entries. In one entry, he wrote about how one keeper was acting weird and all quiet. The other keeper was apparently crying for some reason. Now, some believe that the men were outside trying to secure something and then they got blown over the cliff, or a wave maybe washed them out to sea. Maybe they ran out in a panic and that's why they left their gear inside. Whereas others believe the men were killed and tossed out to sea, or even kidnapped by aliens. But whatever truly happened to them is still unknown. In our 8th spot, we have the Isdal woman. In 1970, a mysterious woman was found burned to death in Ice Valley, Norway. We don't know who she is, and it seems like someone didn't want us to find out. Why? Well, all the labels were cut off of her clothes, and distinctive marks were scraped off of her belongings. It gets weirder when police found that she had a number of fake passports and disguises like wigs. She also had notebook entries that were all in code, so it may be that she was some sort of foreign spy. But to this day, police haven't cracked this case. There have been some breakthroughs over the years, but nothing solid to help us identify this woman. We don't know what happened to her, what she was doing, and who her killer is. In our 7th spot, we have the Watcher. In 2014, a family bought a $1.3 million home in New Jersey. Little did they know that the home came with a lot of baggage, including a creepy stalker who called themselves the Watcher. Before even moving in, they began to receive letters from the Watcher. These letters talked about what the family was doing, proving to them that someone was truly watching them and stalking their every move. Some things that this Watcher said in the letters were, and I quote, "This home has been the subject of my family for decades. I have been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming." And then another letter referred to the new owner's children and asked, have they found out what's in the walls yet? Which made the family terrified, thinking that there was some listening device or, security cameras hidden in the walls. The family ended up hiring investigators and set up cameras, but the Watcher was never caught. As a result, they decided to move out of their home and sell it for a loss. But what about the new buyers? Like, do you have to put in house comes with creepy stalker in the house listing or what? I'm thinking that this was just some ploy for a guy to get $1 million home for cheap. Like he torments everyone who lives there so no one wants to buy the house, and then someone sells it for cheap and he gets it for a steal. Did I just solve this case? I think I did. Coming in at number 6, we have Septic Tank Sam. Septic Tank Sam is the name given to an unidentified man found in a septic tank in Alberta, Canada. So the year was 1977, and a couple went out to an abandoned farmhouse to find a pump for their septic tank. However, when they opened the tank, they found a decomposed body of a man. According to police, it was a very gruesome and sadistic crime scene. The man had been tied, tortured, burned, and shot before being dumped in the tank. The remains were in such bad condition that the examiner took months to figure out if the body belonged to a man or a woman. Eventually, it was discovered to be of a man. His teeth records were then sent to over 800 dentists, but there were no matches whatsoever. It's a very sad case, and I hope one day we can figure out who this man is and who his killer was. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the man from Torrid. This case is fairly creepy and might prove that time travel or multiple dimensions are real. So in July of 1954, a well-dressed man arrived at the Haneda Airport in Tokyo, Japan. Nothing was odd about this man until he was questioned by the customs officer. The man then claimed that he was from Torrid, and it was his 3rd time visiting Japan from his country. However, there was no country named Torrid. His documents, like his passport and IDs, were all authentic, but it said that he was from this mysterious place called Torrid. They eventually took him into custody for further interrogation, thinking that he was lying and he's some criminal. He was then placed in a hotel room that had only one entry and one exit point. That was monitored by 2 guards. But somehow, this man mysteriously vanished. The thing was, he was put up in a room high up in a hotel with no balcony. There's no way he could have escaped. Now, some people think that Torrid is a real country, but just in a different universe, and that this man somehow passed through a parallel dimension and ended up at the airport, the wrong airport. Whereas others believe that he is a time traveler who mistakenly landed at the airport. In our 4th spot, we have the UFOologist. Who here believes in aliens? If you do, hit that like button. Well, Max Spears certainly did. Max Spears was a ufologist as well as a conspiracy theorist. In July of 2016, he went to Poland to attend a conference to speak about secret military programs. On July 16th, he was at a friend's place when he passed out on her couch and stopped breathing. Here's the scary part. Just days before his death, Max told his mom, and I quote, "If anything happens to me, investigate." He also told her that he felt like he was going to get murdered. But the police officer that investigated the scene said he died of natural causes, and no examination or further investigation was conducted. Apparently, he overdosed on anti-anxiety drugs. But many people believe that there's more to this story than just that, especially since he dies only a couple of days after he said he was going to get murdered. Also, he was closing in on details about UFOs. Did someone kill him over this? It's all pretty freaky, am I right? Coming in at number 3, we have the double identity. So once upon a time, there was a man named Lawrence, or Larry Batter. He was a cookware salesman from Ohio. But on March 15th, 1957, he went out for a fishing trip and never returned home. It was deemed that he got lost at sea. He was declared dead in 1960. Here's the thing though, after Larry's disappearance, a man named John Fritz appeared in Nebraska. He became a radio station announcer and soon a local TV personality. John Fritz looked exactly like Larry Batter. In 1965, someone from Ohio recognized John as Larry, but John had no idea who Larry was and no memory of his life. Psychiatrists even examined him and deemed that he was not lying. But after running tests, his fingerprints were the same as Larry's. So John was Larry. I know, it's confusing. So here's a couple of theories. A, he faked his own death and started a new life in Nebraska. Number 2, he suffered from dissociative amnesia and genuinely forgot who he was. Sadly, he passed away in 1966 and his case was never solved. Or maybe Larry had a twin brother. Ever think of that? Come on, guys. In our second spot, we have the Oakville rain blobs. In August of 1994, something weird fell from the skies in Oakville, Washington. At first, people thought it was just rain, but no, it was definitely not water. It was like these strange, clear blobs. One person reported that it was very mushy, almost like jello. This mysterious substance rained down 6 times over a 3-week period. And guess what? Anyone exposed to that substance became very ill. One resident had difficulty breathing, blurred vision, intense nausea, and vertigo. Another resident said that everyone in town contracted a flu-like illness that lasted 2 to 3 months. And sadly, several cats and dogs exposed to the substance became ill and passed away. Upon inspecting the substance, it apparently contained human white blood cells. But to this day, no one knows what it is or what caused it. And in our number 1 spot, we have the toxic lady. This next story is going to shock you. It's probably the craziest one on this list. So on February 19th, 1994, at 8:15 at night, a woman named Gloria Ramirez was wheeled into the emergency room in a hospital in the Southern California city of Riverside. She was only 31 years old, but her blood pressure was very low. She could barely breathe and her heart was beating very fast. Medical staff started helping her right away. Things got weird. For starters, her body was covered in a weird oily sheen and her breath had a fruity garlicky scent to it. The blood then took some of her blood and realized weird particles floating in her blood. The weirdest part, after taking her blood, they noticed a weird smell emitting from the blood and her body. After getting a whiff of her blood, hospital staff became very ill and started dropping. In the end, 23 of the 37 emergency room staff became sick from Gloria. 5 had to be hospitalized for the rest of the night. 1 was severely ill and spent 2 weeks in the ICU. Hence why they gave her the name the Toxic Lady. Sadly, they weren't able to save Gloria's life. Now, what was wrong with Gloria and how come she made so many people sick with her blood? Well, there are a couple of theories out there. One is that Gloria used something called DMSO to help her cervical cancer. DMSO is toxic, but back in the day, it was marketed as a cure-all, like it will cure your pain, anxiety, you name it. Now, when the MDSO is exposed to oxygen, it converts to dimethyl sulfate. As a gas, dimethyl sulfate vapors destroy cells in people's eyes, lungs, and mouth. When it gets in the body, it can cause convulsions, delirium, you name it. Although Gloria's family denies that she used DMSO, this is one explanation explanation to why others got sick when exposed to her.
Starting us off at number 10 is the Devil's Bible, also known as the Codex Gigas. Back in the 13th century, there was a monk who was sentenced to be walled up alive because he broke his sacred vows. Obviously, this guy wasn't a fan of dying, so what did he do? He promised the monastery that if they let him live, he would write a book that would contain all human knowledge in a day. Yikes, that might be worse than death. In order to fulfill his promise, he sold his soul to the devil himself. Supposedly, this Devil's Bible contained a complete Latin translation of the Bible and multiple other texts, such as medical formulas and even instructions for performing exorcisms. This book was created using more than 160 animal skins and apparently takes 2 people just to lift it. Although, mysteriously, this book became a bit lighter because 12 pages are actually missing. Rumor has it, these pages contain satanic rituals to summon the devil himself. Of course, there is no way in knowing unless we read it for ourselves, so if any of you hardcore readers out there get a chance to take a peek, let me know in the comments. Coming in at number 9 is the Nazca lines. Most of us have heard of crop circles before, but what about the Nazca lines? The Nazca lines, just like crop circles, are actually named geoglyphs. Now, what is a geoglyph? A geoglyph is a large design produced on the ground and usually formed by clastic rocks, stones, stone fragments, and gravel or earth. The Nazca lines were first discovered in the 1930s when pilots were flying over the Nazca Desert in southern Peru and came across these massive drawings. The ancient Nazca civilization made up these drawings consisting of animals, humans, and plants around 2,000 years ago. There are said to be over 100 of these drawings spanning a total of 50 square kilometers. And while many can identify who and what created these massive drawings, no one alive actually knows the reason behind them. Scholars theorize that these were massive signs to give incoming sailors directions, or that they were a way to communicate with those above us. Dun dun dun! Here at number 8 we have the Roman dodecahedrons. All over the world for hundreds of years, random stone and bronze objects have been popping up in fields and sometimes even in people's yards. These objects are called the Roman dodecahedrons. These objects have 12 sides with a small circle on each and pegs sticking out of every single corner. Experts have dated these objects all the way back to the 2nd and 3rd centuries CE, but once again, they have no idea of their purpose. Many believe these objects resemble an ancient nautical devices, or were used to sow winter grains or even calibrate water pipes for Roman architects. In the end, all of these are just theories and cannot be told for sure. So maybe go and invest in a metal detector and see what you can find. At number 7, we have the King List. Dating all the way back to the 3rd millennium BCE, this giant slab known as the King List lists all of the Sumerian kings with their respective dynasties, locations, and the times they were in power. This may not seem like much of a mystery to you, but the mystery isn't the list of the Sumerian kings on the slab, but what is actually included in the list of kings. There are mythological events inscribed on the slab, as well as the events of the Great Flood and the tales of Gilgamesh, meaning that the stories from the Old Testament could indeed be true and that the kings included on the list were actually gods or demigods. Hopefully all that power didn't go to their heads. At number 6, we have the Antikythera mechanism. Back in 1900, a group of sponge divers discovered a shipwreck in the Mediterranean dating all the way back to 70 to 60 BCE. These divers salvaged 3 pieces of bronze making up what is now known as the Antikythera mechanism. This shoebox-sized artifact stunned scholars for over a century due to the fact that the object's gears and internal mechanisms were far beyond any of the known Greek tech of the time. Some even believe that this object is proof of ancient aliens' visitations to Earth. Although in the late 20th century, X-rays showed that the object is designed to track astronomical movements and was confirmed later by CT scans that revealed inscriptions for what was basically an ancient computer. While the object's use has now been confirmed, what is still puzzling is the advanced construction and precision of this tool that is believed to be way more advanced than what was available at the time. I don't know. If you ask me, I say aliens. At number 5, we have the stone spheres of Costa Rica. Ever since the 1940s, scientists have been digging up these ancient mysterious spheres in the Diques Delta of Costa Rica. Originally discovered by agricultural forays by the United Fruit Company, small stone spheres ranging from a few centimeters wide to 2 meters in diameter and weighing over 16 tons have been popping up everywhere in the Diques Delta. Every single one of these spheres is man-made and made up of an igneous stone known as granodiorite. Many of these stone spheres have been moved to high-profile locations throughout Costa Rica, and some are even now privately owned. Everyone seems to love them for their decoration, but the coolest thing about them is that absolutely no one knows why, how, or who made these strange objects. Seems to be a common theme, huh? At number 4, we have the bog bodies of Northern Europe. Ever since the 18th century, hundreds and hundreds of well-preserved human bodies have been discovered in the peat bogs of Northern Europe. Some of these bodies have been dated all the way back to 8000 BCE. Some of you may be familiar with the famous Toland Man, who was discovered back in 1950 by 2 Danish farmers in a small town in Denmark. The Toland Man is believed to be from the pre-Roman Iron Age of the 3rd century BCE. His body was so well preserved that scientists were able to look at the contents of his stomach to determine where he lived. Now, I know what you're thinking. Dewey, this sounds amazingly gross and cool, but where's the mystery, my dude? Well, I'm glad you asked. All of the bodies that have been found have no explanation as to why they were placed in the bogs, nor why this way of disposal would be utilized. There are only speculations that these people were either sacrifices or social outcasts who were fated to meet their doom. Wow. And I thought high school kids were mean. Coming in at number 3 is the underwater ruins of Japan. Just under the surface off the coast of Yonaguni-jima is Japan's very own Atlantis. First discovered back in 1995, divers and researchers believed the findings to be nothing more than just a series of weird rock formations that included straight lines and right angles. Later, there were researchers that discovered a large stone gateway, carved stairways, and streets to huge vaulting towers. Many believe the underwater mystery to be the fallen city of the Jomon people. Experts believe that the city didn't fall into the sea like other fabled underwater cities, but actually slowly submerged over thousands of years. It is believed that this site could hold secrets and answers to all of the other theorized underwater cities around the world, such as Atlantis. Now, we could continue to theorize, or we could just believe that Aquaman starring Jason Momoa is actually a documentary and he currently does live in the ocean. I could see it. At number 2, we have the Piri Reis map. In 1929, this old map was found in the Sultan's palace in Istanbul, Turkey. A legendary commander of the Ottoman fleet by the name of Piri Reis, who lived from 1465 to 1553, is the author of the map. Reis's map is extremely precise. So precise that it actually includes the continent of Antarctica. But wait, hold the phone. Antarctica wasn't discovered until 1773 by British Captain James Cook. But yet, here is Piri Reis's map showing Antarctica back in 1513. Was Antarctica actually just discovered much earlier than originally thought? Or did James Cook just take credit for someone else's hard work? We might never know. Finally, coming in at number 1 is the infamous Big Daddy Stonehenge. In case you've been living under a prehistoric rock for the last few thousand years, you've probably heard of Stonehenge. Stonehenge is a giant prehistoric monument that is located in England and dates back to 3000 BC. The monument consists of a ring of standing stones all weighing around 25 ton, originally from a quarry located 25 kilometers or 15.53 miles away from the current monument. Not one person knows how these ancient people could have moved these massive stones without the use of a wheel or pulley, or why they were even formed in the first place. Is it an ancient observatory? Healing place? Did ancient aliens create it as a landing pad? We may never actually know.
Alright. Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Henry Baltimore Jr. In 1973, Henry was a 21-year-old honors student at the University of Michigan who had a very promising future ahead of him. In March of that year, Henry was unfortunately attacked inside of his apartment. 2 men broke in and tied him to the bed before stealing both money and material items. Henry was reluctant to report this incident to the police, but did end up doing so. After this, a suspect named Roy Davis was arrested and charged with armed robbery, and Henry was scheduled to testify at his hearing, but never showed up. 2 days after the hearing, Henry did resurface and asked the prosecutors to drop the charges because he was frightened, but they refused and Henry was rescheduled to testify. 2 days before this rescheduled hearing, Henry ended up disappearing very suspiciously. Originally, people believed that he may have gone into hiding considering how vocal he was about being frightened, but that belief quickly went away and people began to suspect something a lot more sinister was at play. Henry's family especially knew something was wrong because there was no way that he would disappear without telling at least one of them. Without Henry and his testimony, Roy ended up taking a plea deal and only was sentenced to 6 weeks. Roy was of course considered a person of interest in Henry's disappearance, and a neighbor of Henry's even said that they saw Roy and another man knocking on Henry's door the day he disappeared, but Roy's mother offered her son an alibi. Roy has never been formally charged for the disappearance. The 2 theories of what happened to Henry are either that someone abducted and took the life of Henry to prevent him from testifying,
testifying, or Henry left Michigan, changed his identity, and assumed a new name. You would have hoped if it was the latter, he would have at least told one of his family members. His case remains open almost 50 years later, and who knows, if someone out there who's watching this video knows something about this case, please call in and give any and all information over to the authorities. The remaining family members of Henry deserve to know what happened to this extremely bright young man. In our number 9 spot today, we have Cody James and Gary Harker. Cody James and Gary Harker were longtime friends who were working together on Christmas Day in 1979 in Moline, Illinois. They left Cody's shop to head out in the truck to deliver an air compressor to Rock Island, Illinois, and then head to pick up a $500 payment for it in Davenport, Iowa, which they never made it to. The black truck they were driving was found almost 2 months after they had gone missing, and subsequently was put up for auction after not being claimed for 40 days. The bodies of Cody and Gary were found in the truck bed by the men who ended up purchasing it. 25 years after their deaths, the case was still unsolved, and a friend of Cody and Gary brought police a roll of film that they had been entrusted to by the men. When Cody and Gary gave their friend this film all those years earlier, they said, quote, "If anything happens to us, develop this film." It is crazy to think that this friend waited 25 years to spill this tea, and that perhaps the men knew what was going to happen to them. Unfortunately, the film didn't end up giving police any solid leads, although the case continues to be investigated. In our number 8 spot today, we have Christopher Wallace, also known as the Notorious B.I.G. Christopher Wallace is much better known by his alias, and he was one of the most famous rappers of the 1990s. And even though he was just getting his start, he is considered one of the best rappers of all time. Biggie was a New York rapper, but he was unfortunately killed in March of 1997 after a drive-by shooting while he was in Los Angeles. In 1996, the tensions between the East and West Coast hip-hop and rap scenes were rising, and after the death of Tupac in Las Vegas, rumors began to swirl about Biggie and his possible involvement in that killing. Unfortunately, the people who killed Biggie have never been found, and that is where the mystery comes in. There are a lot of similarities between the killings of Big and Tupac, and since neither of them are solved, there are so many rumors about what exactly happened. Some theories span from a gang member with financial motives to a planned hit by a record company in order to boost sales. There is so much speculation and so many possibilities surrounding this, and I really hope that one day we find out who committed this unbelievable crime. Notorious B.I.G. was only able to release one album before his death, but had 3 albums released posthumously, with the first one achieving a diamond certification in the US. In our number 7 spot today, we have Elizabeth Short, or the Black Dahlia. This is one of the most famous cold cases ever, and that is because it is horrifying, extremely dark, and super mysterious. Elizabeth Short was an aspiring actor, but her life was cut tragically short by an incredibly inhumane act. Elizabeth's body was found when she was only 22 years old in a vacant lot near a park in Los Angeles in January of 1947. The crime was highly publicized because of how graphic it was, but whoever did this was sure to leave little to no evidence behind. A few days after the crime, someone claiming to be the person who committed this crime called to say that he would eventually turn himself in, but wanted police to search for a while. But he also said he would send in some of Beth Short's belongings. He did follow through on this and did send in things, such as her birth certificate, but this didn't end up giving investigators any leads. During the initial investigation, 60 different men confessed to this crime, and since then there have now been over 500 confessions, which is absolutely insane. There are honestly too many theories on this one to even get into right now, and it is quite possible that we may never know what exactly happened to Elizabeth. In our number 6 spot today, we have Jill Dando. Jill was an English journalist and a television presenter until she was killed outside of her southwest London home in 1999. This created the biggest manhunt the country had ever seen since the Yorkshire Ripper in the 70s. A man named Barry George was originally convicted and sentenced to prison for this terrible crime, but he ended up actually being acquitted years later, which now leaves this case unsolved. Jill's next door neighbor heard a surprised gasp from Jill, but he never heard like a shot, and it sounded more like someone who was greeting an old friend. The same neighbor looked out the window and actually saw whoever the killer is, but of course at the time they didn't know who he was or what had just happened, and he also didn't recognize the man, so unfortunately he was unable to give an identification. There are a ton of speculations and rumors about who took Jill's life, and it ranges from a potential stalker to maybe even like a crazy hit job. Hopefully one day there will be answers on why someone would have done something so horrible to Jill. In our number 5 spot today, we have Patricia Meehan. This is a story that really just gives me the chills because the circumstances surrounding it are exceptional exceptionally strange. On April 20th, 1989, Patricia Bernadette Meehan was in a car accident on Highway 200 near Circle, Montana. Witnesses saw her driving her car on the wrong side of the road, which then led to her crashing into off-duty police dispatcher Carol Heights. Carol was luckily uninjured in the crash, and she got out of her vehicle right away. Upon exiting her vehicle, Carol saw Patricia also exit her vehicle, walk up to her, and just stare at her without saying a word. Patricia then walked away, climbed over a fence, and then stood staring at the accident before walking away and disappearing, which, like, literally just talking about it gives me goosebumps. It is so strange. A search began immediately but turned up little results. There have been thousands of reported sightings of Patricia that have potentially given police leads to her whereabouts, but she still has never been found. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Mary Celeste. The Mary Celeste first set sail on November 17th, 1872 with a cargo full of alcohol. Whatever happened over the next month isn't quite clear, but what we do know is that on the afternoon of December 5th of the same year, another ship on the Atlantic crossing found her drifting somewhere between Azores and Portugal. The captain of this ship knew the captain of the Mary Celeste and knew that he was a skilled and capable sailor, so he was extremely suspicious. He ordered a crew to board the Mary Celeste, and when they did, they found that the ship had been deserted, but it was in full seaworthy condition, so why had they abandoned it? Especially the captain. The captain of the ship that found the derelict split his crew and sailed the Mary Celeste to Gibraltar for more investigations, but despite this, the captain, his family, and the crew of 7 that were on board the Mary Celeste simply just disappeared, and no one knows what happened or where they could have gone. I think this one is so famous because it seemingly just has no answers tied to it at all. Like, it really is just one of those mysteries with next to nothing to go off in terms of any sort of clues. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Yuba County 5. On February 24th, 1978, 5 men from Yuba City, California attended a basketball game at California State University. All 5 men went missing after this night, and several days later, the group's car was found abandoned in a remote area of the Plumas National Forest that was way out of the way from where they should have been. There was no reason for the car to have been abandoned because it was in totally fine working condition when it was found. In June of 1978, 4 of the men were found passed away near a trailer camp that is deep in the forest, but the 5th man has never been found. There is a lot of strange information about this case, such as how one of the men starved to death even though he was surrounded by food. There is truly too much to cover about this story that I unfortunately don't have time for, but if you're interested, I would highly recommend looking it up because this case is truly unexplainable and absolutely terrifying. In our number 2 spot today, we have Jim Gray. Jim Gray was an incredibly important computer scientist who was responsible for many computer advancements that changed things for all of us. Other than being a computer scientist, he was also a really experienced and skilled sailor, and one day, on January 28th, 2007, he set sail for a short trip so he could head out and spread his mother's ashes as she had recently passed away. As his trip began, Jim spoke to his wife on the phone and said he would give her a call once he got back in range. After their phone call, he called his daughter as well and left a little message for her, and that was when he was off on his trip, but unfortunately he never ended up returning. Jim's wife Donna was the one who raised the alarm bells as she was away on a trip, but like I mentioned, Jim said he would call her later, and he never did. At this point is when huge searches began. Thousands of images of the area where Jim or his boat might be were uploaded to the Amazon Mechanical Turk for people to look through and see if they could find any kind of signs, but to no avail. Jim also had an automatic emergency position indicating beacon on his ship, but whatever happened to Jim and the ship clearly didn't meet the requirements, or perhaps it had some sort of malfunction, or maybe it was even turned off. To this day, no one knows what happened to Jim or his boat, as no sign or trace of either has ever been found. The theories of what may have happened are endless and range from Jim intentionally disappearing to him being kidnapped for his computer skills and brain in order to do some kind of inside job, and everything in between. There most definitely are theories that are seemingly more likely than others, but at the end of the day, they are all a possibility. In our number 1 spot today, we have Mauro de Moro. Moro was an Italian investigative journalist, and it is said that his profession is most likely what led to his disappearance. On the evening of September 16th, 1970, he was coming back home from work, but never actually returned. Before his disappearance, he apparently was convinced that he had the story of a lifetime, and he even had told his co-workers that he had a story that was going to shake Italy. There are three main speculations and theories about what this story might have been and what could have happened. One theory is that the story could have been related to the death of a man named Enrico, who was the president of Italy's state-owned oil and gas conglomerate, ENI. The next was that his story could have been about finding a drug trafficking network between Sicily and the United States, and the final theory is that his disappearance might have been related to a failed right-wing coup that took place in the 70s. Despite extensive searches, he has never been found, and in fact two of the main detectives who started this case both had their lives taken by the mafia. It is believed that Mora was a victim of what is called lupara bianca, which is a journalistic term for when the mafia takes the life of someone in such a way that their body will never be found. Whatever story he was working on, we'll likely never know, and it's such a tragedy that a job he was so passionate about is most likely what led to his disappearance.
Starting off this countdown, we have Cicada 3301. Now this is one of the most famous internet mysteries of all time. So it all started in 2012 when a mysterious organization, Cicada 3301, posted a weird message on 4chan. According to the message, there was a secret hidden within their posted image, and they were recruiting highly intelligent individuals to try and solve it. They said that solving this would lead them on the road to finding them, and that they looked forward to meeting those that solved it. Well, it turns out that by opening the image file in a text editing app, a string of characters would appear. When decoded, it led users to a website with even more weird messages. Some say that they solved the mystery. Others say that those who completed the puzzle are recruited for something and are never heard from again. What are they recruited for though? That's what I would like to know. In our 9th spot, we have Heaven's Gate. This was a creepy and popular American religious cult on the internet that believed in UFOs. In 1997, police found 39 members of the cult dead inside of a house. Apparently, the members took their lives in order to ascend and board an extraterrestrial spacecraft and go to another planet. They were all found wearing arm patches that read Heaven's Gate Away Team. To this day, the website is still up and running, and no one knows who's running it. Now in 2015, the administrators behind the website did do an email interview. In the interview, they called themselves Tela, which stands for the evolutionary level above humans. They claim that the dead members are actually alive and have transcended their human bodies, and that they will come back eventually. To this day, their identity still remains unknown. In our 8th spot, we have Chip Chan. This is one internet mystery that has always left me unsettled. Chip Chan is the name given to a Korean woman that was discovered in a 4chan webcam thread in 2008. It immediately caught the attention of a number of people because the footage revealed this woman sleeping in unusual positions for long periods of time at unusual times of day. In fact, at first, people thought that she was dead. She also sleeps in weird positions like on a chair or on the floor. After doing further investigation, users found that this woman believes that a mind control weapon was implanted into her ankle bone and under her left eyebrow. This chip is said to control her, and that's what's making her sleep all the time. She also claims that she is being held by a corrupt officer named P, and that she installed these webcams into her home so that she can see what happens to her when she's sleeping. This story is just so freaking creepy, and I don't think it's ever been solved. In our 7th spot today, we have Kanye Quest. Yep, not Kanye West, Kanye Quest. Kanye Quest 3030 is an RPG game that was released in 2013. Now it seems just like a silly game. It centers around Kanye West, who on his way to take out trash travels through a wormhole and into the future. He then has to take down an evil dictator, and you got Tupac, Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre in it, and you can have a rap battle with them. Now the game seems pretty harmless. That was until a player found out the game's dark secret. At one point in the game, you can interact with a displayed message. It seems like gibberish at first, until people realized it said, "Ascend and worship the based god." Further on in the game, you are asked to enter a prompt, and you can type anything you want. But if you type ascend, the whole game changes and you're put in this secret area. Eventually, players got to a screen that congratulated them on being an open-minded and curious mysterious thinker. They then instructed the player to not tell anyone about what they found. It then asks if you wish to participate. If you click yes, then they give you instructions on an exercise that you need to complete. Furthermore, players discovered a QR code that led to a now defunct website. In the end, it was discovered that the game has been tied to the religious cult of Ascensionism and to a mysterious company, Ascension Records. The true meaning of the secret of this game has remained unsolved to this day. Coming in at number 6, we have Jack Froese. Now, there are a number of creepypastas out there about someone dying and then their loved ones receive phone calls or Facebook messages or texts from the dead person. Well, this actually happened in real life. Jack Froese was a 32-year-old man from Dunmore, Pennsylvania. In June of 2011, he died suddenly and unexpectedly from a heart arrhythmia. 5 months after Jack's death, his friend received an email from Jack's account with the subject line, "I'm watching." Soon his family started getting emails from Jack as well. Now, of course, they didn't believe it to be Jack for a second, but whoever it was, they knew intimate details regarding his friends and family, details only Jack would know. To this day, no one knows who sent these emails. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with GhostNet. This is the name given to a large-scale cyber spying operation uncovered in 2009. In fact, it has been described as one of the most extensive operations ever uncovered. Yet, no one knows who was behind this operation. So in 2009, it was found that an organization infiltrated over 1,000 computers across 103 countries. They did this by sending emails with attachments or links to individuals or organizations. By opening the file, the user would unknowingly download a virus onto their computer that allowed the hackers to gain complete control of their computers, so they could read and send data and even turn on someone's webcam and microphone. Like I said, no one knows who was behind this, but since the network originated in China, some believe that the Chinese government had something to do with this. Others believe that the CIA or the Russian government were behind this. In our 4th spot, we have the most mysterious song on the internet. This is the title given to a song with an unknown name, sung by an unknown artist with an unknown origin. It all started when a man named Darius came across an old cassette and liked a song on there and wanted to find the name of it. Him and his sister couldn't figure it out, so they turned to the internet for help. Soon, thousands of music enthusiasts came forward to try and figure out this song. To this day, no one has figured out who's behind this song, hence why it's given the name the most mysterious song on the internet. What's even weirder is when the song was shared online, a number of people recognized it. They said that they have heard it before, they just can't put their finger on it. In our 3rd spot, we have Markovian Parallax Denigrate. This mystery started back in the 90s and revolves around a number of weird and confusing posts that appeared to be complete gibberish. Back then, there was something called Usenet, which was like a forum. On August 5th of 1996, hundreds of weird messages started appearing on Usenet. No one knew what they meant, but people knew that they were related because each post had one thing in common. The subject line read Markovian Parallax Denigrate. Turns out that these are secret codes, but no one has been able to crack them yet. In our 2nd spot, we have Ted the Caver. Now, some say this is merely just a creepypasta, whereas others believe it's a true story. I'll let you decide what you want to think. Back in February of 2000, a man known only by the name of Ted the Caver posted about exploring an unknown virgin cave passage in the US. According to Ted and his journal entries, when him and his friend entered the cave, they found a narrow passageway with a small hole. So they drilled the hole and decided to explore it further. But as they went to explore this cave, weird things began to happen. Him and his friend heard ghastly screaming, they found weird hieroglyphs on the cave walls, and apparently encountered evil spirits in the cave that followed them home. All of this was backed up with images of him and his friend exploring the cave. The last post was on May 19th, 2001, when Ted revisited the cave and said he would update everyone when he returned home. He never updated the post, making people believe that he never returned home. In fact, this mystery was so popular that a horror movie was made off of it. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Lake City Quiet Pills. Now, this is another very weird and wild one. So it starts with the death of a Reddit user, Religion of Peace. He was a moderator for the subreddit Jailbait, which is disturbing on its own. But he mainly posted about his military experience and guns, and would encourage posts to get people to upload pictures on his website, LakeCityQuietPills.com. But as many investigated his site, they realized that hidden inside the site's HTML code was a motto. It said, and I quote, "Dispensing Lake City quiet pills to lousy bastards in need of permanent rest since 1968. It continued on saying, "Shade is maintaining the calendar and access to the file dump. Angel has the job postings for EU and Asia. We aren't sending anyone to me. No one. Don't ask for listings." Then what followed were what appeared to be job listings. Here are some. Immediate need, 8 to 10 Chinese Korean, fluent, Korean dialect accent, details after contact. 12-week, half pay. And they went on to say that they needed Arabic French people. No papers, no problems. A lot of people then theorized that this site was used as a way to pass assassination jobs back and forth. As people dug further, they found a government-owned bullet factory in Missouri called Lake City Ammunition Plant. Meaning, the quiet pills that they're referring to are bullets. I mean, yeah, you get shot by one of those and you'll be quiet. So maybe this website was a front for some illegal activity.
Coming in at number 10, we have what is dark matter? There are several mysteries that the universe has brought us, like how did the universe start? What is at the center of the universe? And how is every dog a good boy? Another one on that list is what on earth is dark matter? Here's the thing, we can't even see dark matter. We just kind of know it's there. How does that work? Well, we see it interact with other things even though we can't see it. Now, how does that work? Well, I have no idea, and we're getting a little too deep into the science for me. But what I do know is that dark matter is supposed to make up more than 85% of all matter in the universe. Well, since there's so much of this stuff floating around in the universe, why is it so hard to find? This is like trying to find a good movie in the DC entertainment universe. Well, Shazam was pretty good, but back to my point. The reason that dark matter is hard to detect is because it doesn't interact with the electromagnetic field, or at least that's what people assume. Coming in at number 9, we have Kryptos. So I will admit there is one person who can solve this mystery, but if they did, it would kinda take the fun out of it. Kryptos is one of the most famous codes in the world. It's a massive art piece that was created back in 1988 by artist Jim Sanborn. It looks like a giant scroll, and on it are 4 sections that have massive cryptograph puzzles on them. 3 out of the 4 riddles have been solved, but the 4th has yet to be cracked. There have been a few hints given by Jim himself. He said that the answer from the other 3 passages have clues as to what the answer is for the 4th. Also, he has revealed some of the words as Berlin, clock, and northeast, and still, people haven't been able to get to the bottom of what this thing means. I mean, come on guys, the dude's giving you full words. I'm sure he'll lay it all out before he dies or has the answer written down somewhere in case he passes in an accident, but unless he tells the world or some genius is able to break it down, we may never know what it means. Coming in at number 8, we have Who is Anonymous? A group of global hackers who unveil some of the dirty secrets that are going on behind the scenes. Who are they? Well, we will probably never know. For those of you who don't know, Anonymous popped up back in 2003, and at first it was mostly just them trolling the Church of Scientology. But since then, Anonymous has become one of the most powerful social movements. Whenever there's a serious political event, you can bet that Anonymous will show up to leak some pretty serious information. They have been widespread supporters of WikiLeaks, and most recently, they were seen during the George Floyd protests. It's hard to tell which claims of Anonymous are real, since anyone with a V for Vendetta mask could claim to be them, but I wouldn't want to be on their bad side because it would seem there is no database that they can't get it into. They have leaked information connected to the police, military services, and even the former President Donald Trump. Coming in at number 7, we have Deciphering the Voynich Manuscripts. If you haven't heard of the Voynich Manuscripts, well, let me take you down a creepy rabbit hole that will leave you scratching your head and probably a little afraid to fall asleep. The exact date that the manuscript was written is unknown, but it's thought that it would have been created somewhere in the 15th century based on the type of of paper it was written on. The origin is also unknown because it was written in a language that has never been seen before, but it's thought that this thing could have come from Italy. But the language or code that is used as text in this manuscript has never been deciphered, even though historians have been trying to figure out what's going on with this book since the 90s. There are illustrations of flora in the book, so it's thought that it could be some record of alchemy or potions. And of course, because it's written in an unknown language, people think it could be the work of the devil. In the end, the whole thing could just be a joke or a bunch of gibberish that some madman wrote down in his spare time. People could be working tirelessly to crack a code that means nothing, or it could be the greatest work of dark magic on the planet. I wouldn't worry about it though, because we're probably going to be long gone before someone ever figures this out. Coming in at number 6, we have the steppe geoglyphs. History has left us with so many mysteries that it's hard to keep up with them all. Whether we're talking pyramids, Mayan temples, or is Atlantis a real place? All of these things have us questioning reality. Well, throw the steppe geoglyphs on the list because they are a head scratcher. They were discovered back in 2007 by researchers who were trying to find some sort of ancient pyramid system in Kazakhstan, and what they found was just as bizarre. Markings left on the earth that span for hundreds of miles and come in all sorts of strange shapes. Some of them are large arcing lines and others look kind of like symbols that we would recognize today. The oldest of them was over 8,000 years old. The answer as to why they are there or which group of people made them is still a mystery. It's thought that some of the markings could have been left to track the sun and the stars, as many other civilizations have done similar things, but there still isn't enough information to confirm that, so we're going to jump straight to the most logical answer, which is aliens did it. That's the one that everyone likes to use to explain anything old and weird. Coming in at number 5, we have the lost city of Atlantis. Was this a real place? Was it the most technologically advanced place in the world? Does Aquaman live there and rule with an iron claw? There are some people who swear that Atlantis is a real place that succumbed to some sort of natural disaster and might hold the greatest treasure on the planet. There are other people who think that it's all just made up, and then there's a third group of people who just want to hang out with mermaids. Coming in number 4, we have how did they ruin Game of Thrones? Just a warning, there is definitely going to be some spoilers in this point, so if you don't want to see it, skip to number 3. Okay, here's a fun one, but how on earth did the most popular show on TV, a show that had people clamoring all over it, and was the cornerstone of our culture, just fizzle out into nothing like it almost never existed? Now there are some ideas as to how this could have happened. There are rumors that the directors rushed the final season, that HBO told them that they could take as much time as they wanted, but they got an offer from Disney to work on Star Wars, so they sped through the final season so they can move on to something bigger. Later, the final season of Game of Thrones was so disastrous that they lost the Disney deal. There were just so many unanswered questions. Why did Arya never use her superpowers? How did a dragon get killed so easily? Why did Euron Greyjoy always pop up in the right place at the right time? Why does Jon Snow never fight one-on-one with the Night King? What was Bran doing in the whole final showdown fight? Right now, we have no explanation for any of this. Coming in at number 3, we have the Copper Scroll treasure. A lost treasure is always a great way to get people interested in a mystery. You're telling me there's an untold amount of money somewhere, and it could be all mine with a little bit of luck and a lot of digging? Well, kind of. The treasure of the Copper Scroll was first revealed back in the year 1952. It was part of a great archaeological find in a series of caves next to the Dead Sea. The Copper Scroll is literally a massive piece of copper that is writing engraved into it. Man, to think there was a time when copper was less valuable than paper, so you'd write down all your information in a giant piece of metal. The Copper Scroll talks about a treasure of gold and silver so large that most people think it's a lie. The size of the treasure would maybe be the largest gold and silver reserve in the world. Now, there is some backing to this. At the time that this scroll was written, there was a Roman force that was controlling the area. The people didn't like this, and they were waging war against the Romans. Now, because of this, there could have been several wealthy people who didn't want their goods to fall into the wrong hands and decided that they would pool their resources to keep their moolah in the same place and safe. But the question still stands. If the treasure is real, where is it? Coming in at number 2, we have the ghost boats of Japan. Now this sounds like some sort of urban legend, but I will tell you that this is a very real thing, and it's one of the creepiest stories I've heard in recent years. The ghost boats of Japan have been washing up on the shores of northeastern Japan, and no one knows who sent them. They have all been wooden ships with no one on them. Well, no one alive has been on them. Every boat that makes contact with the shore has bodies in it. Sometimes it's just body parts, like a series of skulls were found on one boat. Other times it's a few bodies laid on top of each other, and the numbers vary every year. One year, 80 bodies were found in mysterious wooden boats that washed up on Japanese shores. Now, even though the exact breakdown on why this is happening is still a mystery, there have been some clues that have popped up along the way. One of the biggest is that there was some Korean writing on board of one of the ships and a torn piece of the North Korean flag. So it would be a good guess that North Korea is doing this. Why they would be sending ghost boats with dead bodies in them out into the water, well, we still can't answer that. And coming at the number 1 spot, we have, is Jesus real? For the amount of people who pray to this dude and call him the Son of God, there is zero evidence that he actually walked the earth. Obviously, there's a lot of people who think that he did, but there's also a lot of people who think the Browns are going to win the Super Bowl every year. There are several things about Jesus being real that have been disproven. There were people trying to say that they discovered the house that Jesus grew up in, but carbon dating disproved that, as the time frames didn't add up. The house was constructed way after Jesus' time. There are a lot of people that think the teachings of Jesus aren't from a real person, but were put down on paper as a way to guide people to be kind to one another. Similar to the way that tales from pretty much every other culture in the world were not real, but are highlighted as a lesson. There's also a very interesting documentary about a man who was researching all of the scriptures about Jesus, and he thinks that the symbol for Jesus in the Bible was actually a symbol for mushrooms, like magic mushrooms, saying that taking mushrooms was the key to enlightenment and a religious experience. That I can get behind.